In today's video, Rusty and I are going over the differences in NASCAR fuel cells, fill plates, fuel filters, pickups, dry brakes, hoses, foam, and much, much more. We're also going to unbox and install a brand new 18-gallon fuel-safe fuel cell in our track day Supra. Along with the fill hoses and vent, we're going to put a dry brake in the fender, and we're going to wrap up everything in the trunk by installing our deck lid tethers and our dry sump breather catch can as well. So let's get started. You laying down on the job already, buddy? It's hard to find good help these days. Well, my friends, to kick this video off, we're going to start with fill plates, and we're going to start there for one reason, and that is this original right here. This GW on here stands for Gene White. Gene White was a Firestone dealer out of Atlanta, Georgia. He owned and raced stock cars at one time. He was also an IndyCar owner and USAC owner. More importantly, he was a Firestone dealer with connections to Firestone. With all of the deaths and explosions that you saw in the 60s from stock cars, literally running a stocked stamped metal tank, and the explosions and deaths it caused, he thought we needed something better. The entire industry did. He looked towards the aircraft industry, as more specifically Korean War and World War II fighter planes and the fuel cells that they had used. Many of them were rubber reinforced nylon or Kevlar reinforced nylon. That fuel cell idea came to NASCAR through Gene White, and he standardized the 24-hole top. The reason they brought that to it is because in World War II aircraft and Korean War aircraft and all military aircraft, fuel cells are designed to be self-sealing. Believe it or not, there's two layers to them, and there's a gel in between. So if they're hit with shrapnel, or if they're hit with a bullet or something breaks in a plane, comes apart and rips a hole in it, to try and minimize the amount of fuel leakage that comes out of the fuel cell. When I was in the military, ATL and FuelSafe built multiple fuel cells for helicopters that I had worked on and taken apart completely. And some of them that we took apart, we had to destroy them because they were out of date, couldn't be used again. So we would cut them apart, and literally an epoxy would come out between the two layers, and that was the chemical that was used as a self-sealing agent. Once it got out into the atmosphere and was exposed to oxygen, it would begin to self-seal and harden and literally bond like a glue on the tank. Gene White brought this, standardized it as a 24-hole fill plate. Even though it says patent pending, that patent was ripped off by several people. This one also has wings on it for a certain reason. In the beginning, when they made fuel cell cans, the literal can hole opening would fall inside of the can. So he came up with this idea to put the bat wing on it so that it would keep the fuel cell bladder from dropping inside of the can, and it would hold it flush with the can. Modern day ones, the actual can bolts between the fill plate and the fuel cell, but that was a great idea back in the day. I say it was knocked off, and in where it was beginning to be knocked off was several different racers and teams. This is a Ford, and this is a Holman Moody. This is the Holman Moody piece. I've seen several different types of these. I've seen a couple in later year race cars, I'd say late 70s, early 80s. I've seen these in cars up to 83, 84. That had a much larger HM on it. These came kind of blank, and the holes were drilled in them for fuel fill or fuel vent. The vent itself and the fill was cast in, and on the bottom it was cast for the actual safety ball and a rollover. This is an old school original. This is attributed to be a Holman Moody, but it has a Ford part number cast into it. A C7HM907 is on this one, and it also says 11GN on it. I don't know if this is a Bondi Long piece. I don't know what car it came from. Could have been a Junior Johnson car later in the day. I don't know. I picked this one up with a bunch of parts I cleaned out. This Holman Moody one, if you look at it, the depth of the ball compared to this one is much different, and you can see where this one was modified. As we get into the 80s, teams got away from the cast parts. These would break, these would crack, these would fatigue, and we got into the aluminum plate. This one came off of a Junior Johnson car, I know, because that's where I got it from and that's what I worked on. This is a Hutchison-Pagan model. These are both 1/4-inch aluminum plates. They also have the safety balls on the bottom. Now, this was standard practice for a long time, up until about, I would say, 98, 99, and then we got into the flapper valve style. Now, these were good for the time. There's nothing wrong with them. I'm not dogging them. I'm not saying they're bad. They had their place, and in restorations, they have their place. But they had one serious drawback that the flapper style doesn't. One is a safety factor. When a car would come into pit road and they would fuel up and they would fill this car up with 22 gallons of fuel back in the day, your fuel level would already be to the fill plate and up in the tube. A car would come out of pit road, go through 1 and 2, accelerate down the backstretch. By the time they got to 3 and 4, tires were still cold. They sailed it off in there, backed it into the wall. And the fuel that was above this level already would blow the hose off when they backed into the wall and cause a fire and an explosion. There are multiple videos that you can see online of this if you look at YouTube. This also took up space, valuable fuel space inside the fuel cell bladder. If you add up the material with the balls and all of the aluminum in here, you could probably get another 2 to 3 pints of fuel, which could mean winning a race. Teams got away from this. Many people innovated a different style. This is an ATL and this is a Waterman. These are 2 that I have. This ball style, still very popular in vintage racing. I have seen these in multiple stages in design. I think I have 10 or 12. I don't have it here, but I've got a really cool RCR one. It has an RCR logo on it. This one is a Hutch. I also have a BSR one. Now the flapper style really changed things when it came to the NASCAR style fuel cell. The flapper style was much safer. And the reason I say that is because if you look at it, there's a flapper valve on the bottom. So when the fuel tank was full up to here and you backed it into the wall, fuel would hit that flapper valve and not blow the actual fill tube off of the car or blow it out of the dry brake. The actual safety vent valve on these, when they get to about 85, not even 85 degrees, slightly above that, it automatically starts to close. It doesn't need to be upside down like the ball. It is tension rated with a spring, so as soon as the car starts to roll, it closes before it actually gets upside down. The Waterman top is what's currently used in many NASCAR Xfinity Series cars. They're the last series in NASCAR's top 3 tiers that run a carbureted engine, and they run this. We're not going into EFI stuff. The Gen 7 Cup stuff with a swirl tank inside of it. It's got a swirl pot inside the fill plate. It's got dual fuel pumps. The EFI stuff, the Holly pumps and everything for the truck series, I'm not going into any of that because we are building a carbureted NASCAR Xfinity Series car and engine. I am going to use a polished Waterman top. Not this one. I have another one that's already been polished and cleaned, but this one also has the flapper valve in it as well. It's spring loaded. As you can see, the spring loaded seal on the bottom with an O-ring. It fills. NASCAR rules say 2.5 inch inside diameter is the maximum. This will allow you to get the most fuel in your car. Something else that I've seen through the years that many people, let's see, what's the best one to use? We'll use this Holman Moody. If you look at the vents and the fuel tops and the angles into which the hoses are pointing, pretty simple. Back in the day, they would put this in the car, it'd go from there on the left side straight to the fender fill. For mileage, teams were taking the top, flipping it around, moving the inlet fill as far to the right side of the car as they can so they could put a longer fill hose on it. That fill hose allowed them to hold another pint, some of them, depending on the dry brake that's on the car, almost another half gallon of fuel. So this is what we're going to use on our car. We're going to do a number 10 in and out and into a fuel filter. These things are also SFI rated. They have stickers on them. They come with tabs hanging on them. If you're not sure, contact the manufacturer and ask them if that part is SFI rating and what the rating is. Now let's take a look at difference in cans. Let's talk about fuel cell cans. I've got 2 here, and we're going to talk about more specifically the modern era of NASCAR, 1981 and newer to the downsized 110-inch car. This is your standard 22-gallon cell, and this is your standard 18-gallon cell. Looking at them, you would think they were similar, but the big difference is in the 22, your fill plate's always going to be centered, and your 18, it's always going to be offset. Dimension-wise, they look the same, but the bladders will not fit in one another. The big difference is this can is 33 by 17 by 9. This is 33 by 17 by 8. So the cans are taller. I've had people message me saying they need a 22-gallon can. I send it to them, they put it in their car, and it doesn't fit because it's taller. The fuel cell rack or cage that bolts down and retains it won't fit because you'll have over an inch of space in between the bolts. You need to make sure when you order one, you measure the fuel cell can in the trunk of your car, the retaining can that actually holds the fuel cell in. The 22-gallon cans can be put in. You can build spacers. You can build new fuel racks. The 18-gallon can will easily replace the 22-gallon can. They sell aluminum honeycomb that you can make spacers out of, and we're going to use some in our car today. And this is also shallower, so they sell an aluminum plate spacer that you can put underneath it to raise this up and keep the tension between the top of the fuel rack. These are both empty, they're good cans. You can fit a bladder in that hole where the 24-hole fill plate goes. I've done it. People have told me before, I did it, it ripped my bladder, I cut my hand, all these crazy things. Let me share a secret with you. Get a piece of 5/8" radiator hose, split it down the middle on one side, take that 5/8" radiator hose, use it as a C-type shield, wrap it around here, use a couple pieces of duct tape to hold it in place, lay your fuel bladder out in the sun for about 30 minutes on a bright day where it becomes very pliable with no foam in it, and it will slide right in there without cutting your hands or tearing up your bladder. I have done this countless times over the past 20 years. Believe me, it works. Like I said, the cans, they look similar in size, but the big difference, besides the fill plate, is the deck height. Like I said, there's your big difference right there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab two more that have bladders in them, and I'm going to show you the difference between a road course bladder and a circle track bladder. Let's do that. Here I have two 18-gallon fuel-safe fuel cells. They're both Kevlar reinforced bladders. They're both 18 with an offset fill plate. This one is a road course cell, and this one is an oval track cell. The big difference between the two is the pickup location and the fuel box. The fuel box is a trapdoor area of the fuel tank where your pickup is located. It has small trapdoors in it that allow fuel to flow in but not flow out. In a road course cell, it's located centrally in the middle. I'll take the camera and show you on both of these in a moment. And the trapdoors are there. The reason it's in the middle is because under acceleration going through the corners, it throws fuel left and right, and that fuel gets trapped in the box. They're both located at the rear of the cell because your car is typically under acceleration. In an oval track cell like this, it's typically located down in the right rear. The reason being, going around in a circle, then centrifugal force throws your fuel to the outside edge of the tank, and under acceleration, it pushes it back to that corner. It's triangulated in this cell. It has a trap door on it as well, and the pickup is in there as well. So I'm going to pull the tape off this. I'm going to show you both of these. I buy these used, typically, depending on the price, from teams that run them maybe one full year, and then I test them. The way I test them is I take them outside, I lay them flat on the ground, like this, and I fill them up with about 15 gallons of water after I've removed all of the foam. I take the foam and I lay it behind my building under the overhang, and I just let it air out. But you fill up with about 15 gallons of water because typically if they sit with fuel, hydrocarbon fuel, they will deteriorate the bladder through here. Fill it up with about 15 gallons and let it sit outside on dry concrete for about 2 days, and that will tell you if any water seeps between the bladder and the can and makes it out of the can onto the ground. It's a telltale sign. Both of these checked out okay. I pumped all the water out. I blew them out with a leaf blower, dried them out with a paper towel, taped the top off so that they don't get dirty or debris in them. I'm going to grab the camera now and I'm going to show you the difference between a road course pickup and a circle track pickup. Now let's take a look internally at a road course and an oval track fuel cell. The pickup box is centrally located. I've removed some of the fuel cell foam so that you can see that. Now, right in the center, we've got a trap door in the middle. Fuel rushes against it. On the side, we have two angular pieces of Kevlar that direct fuel to that center location. And then if we stick this around the side, we can also look around the side and see down in the rear, there's also a trap door on the side. So altogether, there's 3 trap doors, and then it also fills up in the space on the top. And there's also a trap door around this side. It's kind of hard to see. But that is where the location of a center fill road course fuel cell pickup box is located. Now let's take a look at an oval track fuel cell. Now this is an oval track can. All of the foam has been removed out of this one, and the pickup is over here in the right rear. Let me stick my light in there and we'll take a look at that. There is the pickup for an oval track cell all the way in the very back corner of the right rear, and it's angled on both sides in the corner to direct fuel into that flap door into the pickup. It can also fill over the top here when they're filling the can. That's the difference between an oval track and a road course fuel cell. We've talked about fuel cell cans, bladders and fill plates, let's talk about getting it filled at the dry brake. To my left here, which would be your right, I've got two of the original earlier style dry brakes. This is a Richardson and this is an Oval Craft. Both were used in the NASCAR Cup Series since the modern era. I would say 77, 78, you started seeing stuff like this. The Wood Brothers really revolutionized pit stops and quick fill cans. This stuff here is why we ended up at the Schultz dry brake system we have now. I have seen these, and I have one that came out of a Hendrick car that, I kid you not, from 99, where it is a 4 1/4, almost 5-inch tube like this, all the way to the fill plate with a little 4-inch piece of rubber, and that thing will hold almost 1.5 gallons of fuel. It is ridiculous. But things like that, necessity being the mother of invention, teams doing stuff like that to get as much fuel on board the car as they can, are why we are now at the Schultz system. This is the fender mounted side, mounts to the fender inside of the car, and it uses one solid hose. The rule now says 2.5-inch inside diameter hose is the max you can go, and it needs to be a straight shot from the fender fill right to the dry brake. Unlike the older cars, I'm sure some of you have seen them, where they've used this clear PVC polyvinyl tube where it goes into fender fill and has a big loop and it swoops around and goes into the fender fill. NASCAR doesn't allow that garbage anymore. I think it's unsightly when it turns yellow myself. Now it is straight from the fender fill, straight into the fill plate, and your vent hose comes in a set length. This is your vent hose that is used now. Comes out of the fill plate, goes into the fender vent right out to there. Now, this dry brake and this are supposed to reduce the amount of fuel spillage on pit road. I have to disagree with that. I think it's just as bad as it's ever been. Now, these are great if you are racing. If you have a track day car, they're not so great because it's a pain in the ass to fill these with fuel. I take them apart. This is what it looks like internally. There's a lip on the edge of it. I take it in a belt sander, sand it smooth, flip it back over, get a Holley fill bung, TIG weld a plate on top of it, put the fill bung in, and I come up with this for track day use. Fill plate, fuel filler, vent hose to fuel filler. This is threaded for a number 3 AN breather that screws in there. Put Loctite on it, pull the cap off, take your simple VP Sunoco fuel dump can with a 1 1/4-inch spout and fill your car. Now, I have seen several people use some of the most ungodly, ugly fender fill vents ever. If that's within your budget, that is what it is. But this, I've made dozens of these for friends of mine and myself, and I've made a new one for the Supra that we're going to install. They also have a fender fill. If you're just going to put a vent right on top of your fuel cell, you can also pick up these billet aluminum fakey show car fender fill plugs to go in the receptacle of the fender as well. I'm going to grab the camera and I'm going to show you how these work, and we're going to go over this for a second, and then we're going to unbox our new fuel cell for the Supra. Let's talk about the Schultz dry brake system. This is the fender side, the fill side that stays attached to the car. This is the pit can side that fills the car. When these two are engaged and slid together, the receptacle portion of the Schultz dry brake is pushed in here. This is where the fuel fills the dry brake. All of the fuel going in the car goes through here. This lip on the outside seals against this O-ring on the silver portion of the filler. When this is pushed in, the blue portion will push down on this portion, and that allows the fuel to fill. The outside portion of this is the vent. That's where it vents. You can't add fuel to the car without venting the excess air in the tank. Only so much volume can go in. When this is pushed in, the external O-ring on our filler here will seal against the outside edge of the tank. When both of these are pushed in, it allows the tank to vent and to fill at the same time. Like I said, these two lock together, and that entire operation is taking place between two O-rings here. When it does vent, this air comes back into the receptacle of the can, comes up this tube into another portion of tubing and into this one-way vent. This is a Schultz one-way vent that allows the air that was in the tank to escape here. If fluid backs up and hits it, it closes the valve and doesn't allow fluid to get into the atmosphere. That is how this system works as one piece to actually fill the car. Now this is a brand new fuel safe fuel cell. I ordered this for my Supra Special. It was a custom order. As you can see, it says so right down the front of the box. I ordered this as a road course bladder, Kevlar, and a steel can with a flat open top. The top that I ordered on this is going to come off. It's actually going to a friend of mine that races a street stock. He needed one. I wanted to give him a good one with a safety flapper valve in it, so we're going to give him this one. And we're going to put our Waterman top on this fuel cell and get it in the Supra. If you've never seen one of these open before, it comes with a boatload of packing paper inside of it. Every fuel cell that you buy from Fuel Safe will come with an SFI certification paper that you should keep in your toolbox. Wherever you go to race your car and they ask for your fuel cell safety sheet, you can give it to them, show it's new, not out of date, and it's certified. These used to also come with a cool pair of sunglasses. I haven't seen them in the last 2 cans that I bought, but we'll open this thing up and take a look. From my experience, opening these with a knife isn't going to hurt anything. I've opened up dozens of these brand new, and believe me, when I open it and you see the amount of actual packing paper that's in here, you'll understand why. Let's see, rip this open. We'll just cut it. I don't need the box. We'll just tear this open. All right, let's get rid of all of this and find our SFI sheet. So this is your Fuel Safe validation sheet. This is your certification. It tells you date of manufacturer, when it's valid to, what the part number is. This one's custom. I ordered this one custom for my car. Material type, serial number on the bladder, homologation number. And if you go to the racetrack, take this with you. Put it in your toolbox on the truck. Some sanctioning bodies require you to have this, so take it with you. This is a very important piece. And let's get the rest of this crap out of here, and we will pull this out. We do not need the rest of this. That can go on the fire pile tonight. And this is my new fuel cell. And like I said, it's got a regular top on it. A friend of mine that races street stocks needed one, so I'm going to pull this one off and give it to him. And we're going to install our Waterman Nascar style top on here, and we will get this set up to run. So let's do that now. Even for a street stock, this is safe. Up next, we are going to build a fuel sump box for our fuel cell. These are commonly used in road racing. These typically cost between $175 to $250 if you go online and buy them. I found 5 of these fuel boxes and 16 of these fuel flap doors at SRI on the counter. These were on the shelf. I bought all 5 for $10 a piece, and I bought a bag of these with I think 18 in it altogether. Some of them were broken and got thrown away for $20. There are also several different kinds of pickups. You have the duck foot style pickup. This one is plastic. This one is billet aluminum. You have the bat wing. This in the old days, they would just lay it in the corner of the fuel cell, stick all the fuel foam on top of it and hold it in place. You also have the circular style, and we're gonna have our pickup hose. So what we're gonna do now is we're going to modify this particular pickup box with a duckbill pickup foot. Come on, Rusty, be careful, buddy. With a duckbill pickup foot. Oh, you're killing me, guy. This is going to sit inside our fuel box. The hose is going to come across, go into our pickup. Inside we'll have the duckbill foot. All of this will get secured into place. And on the front and on both sides, left and right, we're going to cut a hole and we're going to securely mount the trap door to keep fuel inside of the box. Can I get some work done, buddy? I gave you attention all day long, fella. Come on, you're killing me. The first thing we need to do to our fuel box is we need to mark both sides with a fuel fill flapper. This flapper will trap fuel. It mounts like this on the inside. Fuel will flow in and it will close and prevent it from flowing back out of our sump catch can in the middle. What I'm going to do now is mark both sides. We're going to set it back towards the rear. Come on, bud. We're going to set it back towards the rear. I'm going to mark it. Use a silver Sharpie to write on dark material. I'm going to cut the holes with a razor knife. This is just poly-blown plastic. That's all this is. So we will make this work. I have built probably 100 of these things in the past. We'll just go ahead and mark it. Mark the other side as well. Come on, Rusty, you're killing me, bud. You're killing me. I know there's people asking if you're going to get your own Instagram channel. You have to steal the spotlight, bud. Mark this side. And we'll get a drill and a razor knife. And we'll make this happen. So we got all 4 holes drilled all the way around. So I've trimmed all that out and I've riveted in my fuel flappers on all 3 sides. This allows the box to fill with fuel from all 3 directions because the back of it's going to be against the back side of the fuel cell at the rear of the car. This allows fuel to slosh into the tank, but the trapdoor keeps it from flowing out. Up next, we're going to figure out which actual pickup's going to work, and this is the modified duck foot that I came up with. It is the same exact design. I just cut the wings off of each side. The 3 feet that are on the bottom of this is going to allow it to sit flush in our fuel cell on the bottom of our pickup, but not allow it to suck the actual end of the hose flat against the bottom of the fuel cell and lose fuel pressure. We're going to mount this in there with a number 10 Brown & Miller. Then we will cable tie it in place and we will get it put into our fuel cell. So let's go ahead and install our hose, and we'll tighten this up and tighten that in place. And I will cable tie it in place, and that will keep it against the back of the fuel cell. So we'll just use a regular cable tie. I use the stainless steel ones. I never use the plastic ones, and I never use the white ones. If it has a plastic tab in it, those will tend to dry rot and break. The ones with the stainless steel locking insert in them tend to never fail. When it's in the car, it's going to sit like that, and then it will be into the bottom of my fill plate here. So we're going to install this in the fuel cell and get the fuel cell top back on it. We have our center mount sump box assembled and built. We have our pickup tube hooked up to it. We're going to install it in the cell, put the foam in, and get the top on this thing. It simply drops in the 24-hole top. We're going to push it all the way against the back of the fuel cell. This is going to be the rearmost portion of the car. The actual fill part is going to be here near the rear end. Then we're going to install our foam. We're going to pack this in here so that the box doesn't move, but the fuel cell foam has also been trimmed so that it clearances the flaps on the box. We'll get this packed in here, and once I get all of this in, I will take the camera and show you what it looks like. The fuel cells that I use, I typically use the yellow or the black foam. I tend to stay away or replace any red foam that I find in a fuel cell. That red stuff, whether it's hydrocarbon fuel or E85 or anything with ethanol in it, it will deteriorate. That fine red powder will come apart in the actual foam. It will clog up your fuel filters. It'll get in your carburetor and wreak havoc. I don't know when or why or what company specifically designed that foam or why they use it, but I think it's horrible and I'll never use it in anything I own. This is what our road course sump box looks like installed. As you can see, it's in there with our inlet hose. The fuel cell foam has been trimmed around. This area on the top here has also been trimmed out because our fuel flapper and our relief valve go there. This is where we will hook it up to the bottom of our fill plate, and this will supply our carburetor. So let's go ahead and install the fill plate and wrap this up for tonight. The first thing we need to do is we need to install our retaining ring. This needs to go back inside of our fuel cell. So we'll slip this in. It goes into the rear. And this is what squeezes everything together. So we'll get this mounted in here. And I will show you a neat little trick about this thing when we go to put our fuel top on. We got a new gasket. always use a new gasket. So you have the retaining ring, the bladder. Between the can and the bladder, as you can see here, there's already another gasket. We're gonna put another gasket on between the can and the actual fuel fill top. Now we have our retaining ring in. I'm gonna show you a neat little trick. You get it lined up, you get your new gasket on top. Take some long 1/4 28s. Cut the head off of them, put a slit in the end for a screwdriver. Screw it down into your fuel cell on both sides. And make sure you put the slots in it so you can use a screwdriver on it. What we'll do next is we'll center our fill plate, tighten up our number 10, we'll install the hose. Get it lined up where we want. Take our Allen wrench and tighten the hose. And we can slide it down over those 2 1/4 20s. That will allow us to pull the ring up, seat it against the bottom of the can, and install the rest of our hardware without fighting to get it to start in the ring. What we'll do now is we'll dump this out here. We'll take all of these and we'll get them started. And they will go right in. And all I'm doing with this is getting them started. When I tighten these, they're all going to be tightened by hand because you can over tighten them. And when you install them, you need to make sure that you install the plastic washer because this helps prevent fuel from seeping through the threads and the fill plate. What are you doing, Rusty? You're probably ready to eat, aren't you, buddy? Now that I have all of these in, I can take my screwdriver, back these two out, and install these. And stick these back in the drawer in my toolbox. You always want to make sure that you start these by hand. Do not use a power tool or an electric ratchet of any type on these things. You can smash the washer and squeeze it out. You can also cross thread it, and that's going to be your worst nightmare is trying to get that apart and then replace the internal ring. They're a pain in the butt. You can find them used, but they do get to be expensive, so I suggest not doing it. I've cleaned this up. I bought a buffing wheel and some buffing compound from Harbor Freight, just one of the cheap 10-inch wheels. I'm all about the details, so I just bought one of these from Harbor Freight and 2 tubes of polish, rubbed it out. Put this on I've got a DeWalt bench grinder. I swapped this out with my tungsten grinder and polished it up, cleaned it up, make it look nice and presentable. I'm all about the spit and polish. I like the small details. I like doing the small things to make it stand apart from the others. We're going to tighten this down and be done for the night. Now this may take a few minutes because like I said, it's kind of a by feel thing. And you'll have to go around in stages to make sure that you don't over tighten it. You want it to be snug, but like I said, you don't want to kill the washers that are in there. And I have seen some cars at car shows and at track days and vintage racing gatherings where these little washers are completely yellow, smashed to paper thin, and the entire fuel cell top is seeping fuel. Don't be that guy, don't do that. Quite literally, you can damage everything by over tightening it. That's our finished product. Fuel cell has a road course center pickup in it, our Waterman top with a safety flapper valve on it. It's been cleaned and polished, new can, new bladder, new foam. We'll get this installed in the car in the morning. Hey bud, you wanna go out? Go on. Which way are you going? In or out? Welcome back, everybody. It's been about 8 days since I last worked on the Supra. The first part of this video was shot before I went to Florida with my wife on a mini vacation for a couple of days, and I just stopped on that point. Our fuel cell is still sitting on the workbench. It's ready to go in the Supra. First thing I need to do, though, is on the right side, I'm going to install a new fuel filler on the right side. I'm trying to shift as much weight as I can internally in the car to the right side for a better balance. As you can see, the car has one on the left side right there. We're going to pull that out. We're going to make a pattern of the bolt holes, transfer it to this. 5-Star makes a plug to replace that, so I'm going to pull that green one out, stick it on the shelf. I do need to cut this hole in the fender, and we're going to put that in. I also have my dry sump catch can and plumbing that I need to mount in there. Looking at it, I've got a couple different options. I'm not sure which one I'm going to go with first. So I'm going to turn the car at an angle, make it a little easier to film, a little easier to get around, and then we're going to get back started on it. That's probably the best thing about working on a car with casters, by the way. So these are some of the actual dry sump vents that I have. These mount in the trunk of the car. Hose runs from the dry sump tank at the top, and it vents all of the vapor out of the car. This is a Gibbs. This is a Debo Tech. I've got two more. This one is a Gibbs as well, and this came from MWR. I believe, I don't know, I put a rag on the end of the hose. I need to cut that off. I'm not sure. I don't remember if it's a threaded or a Wiggins style hose I have on there, so let's check that out. Let me cut this off, and I think this is threaded, but it's a Brown & Miller hose. It may be a Wiggins. I don't remember when I put it on. So that is threaded. Now my problem that I was talking about is two of the Gibbs actual breather tanks mount right here on the down bar, but with my fender filler going to be in here, I think it's going to be in line with my actual fill hose. So I may have to go with a Fiberworks or Debo Tech style that's going to mount here on the fender well or down here on the flat. This is the only one that's actually threaded. So with that in place, it's definitely going to cause a problem. Yeah, that's definitely going to be in the way and cause a problem with my fender filler and the hose running across there. But I think we'll mount this one down here, and it's going to be out of the way and even further over to the right side. So this is my mount. I've trimmed some of the fat off of it. As you can see around the edges, it's much thinner. I cleaned a bunch of the bat wing areas off of it. Made it as light as possible, neat and clean as possible. Here's my tank. Mounts in here like this. The only question now is, am I going to mount it sideways? Which I don't like the route of that hose. So we can mount it vertical. And I like that much better. So I think we're going to go with mounting it vertical right there. That's riveted into the wheel tub with 1/8-inch washers and backup washers to hold it in place. Those 4 are more than enough. These are the bands that are going to hold my can on. Now I'm sure many of you are looking at this wondering why in the hell I would put the vapor actual breather portion of this catch can over here. In all honesty, all this does is relieve pressure and allow any vapor that makes it through the loops of this tube into this can to accumulate. I have never seen one of these fill up with oil in 20 years on anything. If your engine blows up to the point that it pushes oil through the dry sump tank, through this tube, and fills this up with oil, you have bigger problems to worry about than just a little bit of oil blowing out of this onto the inner fender. So what I do is I put a red rag in there. I've seen hundreds of teams do this. I've seen this on dozens and dozens and dozens of race-winning cars. Put this in there. Any moisture that does accumulate will accumulate in there. And then we zip tie the end of the actual opening. We put an outer wears filter on it and we cable tie it in place. So this is our installed finished product. This is our dry sump vapor catch can assembly. As you've seen, it's been mounted to the inner fender tub. It's got 2 stainless clamps holding it in place. We've got a rag inside of it to catch any moisture. We can swap that rag out when we check it. The outerwear filter is cable tied to it. Up here, this hose goes inside the car, comes through a seals-it grommet in the rear, goes across the package tray, hooks to the top of the dry sump tank where we fill it, and that's where our vapor comes from. Up next, we're going to cut out this hole here. I don't know if you can barely see it, but there's an outline here of the shape of where you're allowed to cut it out and where it goes. We're going to make a template from the one on the other side, figure out where our bolt holes go, mark this, cut it out, and install the green right-hand fuel filler. First thing I need to do is pull this out, and then we'll make a template of the bolt holes that go in here. The bottom portion of the new one that I have for the right side has divots in it for these 3 bottom bolt holes. These are actually 1032s with floating nut plates. This one was already installed, so we're going to pull all this out. We're going to use a piece of template paper. We'll tape it over and trace out the inside, what the actual opening of the hole is, and then we'll figure out where the bolt holes are. And we'll use that as a template on the right side fender. This is just a leftover piece of template paper for making our radiator ductwork. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tape it in place, then I'm going to mark it on the inside with a Sharpie. That'll give me the pattern for my bolt hole. And when I take it to the other side, I can just flip it over, mark it where I need it. I'm not worried about the opening size because it's already molded into the fender over on the right side. That's our opening. And what I'll do is I'll cut the inside out and I'll hole punch the holes. And then I will take this to the other side and lay it on the fender. Because it's a reverse of this, I will literally take it over to the other side, lay it on the fender this way so that it curves this way, and mark my holes for my new fender filler. The hole saw made quick work of the large chunk. I'm going to sneak up on it with some tin snips. It actually cuts this pretty easy. Then I'm going to come back with a drum sander and clean up the actual edge. Now I get the drum sander, put it on my drill, wipe this down. We'll come back and clean all this up with the drum sander and you won't even know it was there. And that's exactly how it's supposed to fit. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back around the inside edge here and I'm going to clean that up with a deburring tool, get rid of all the fuzz, and then we'll mark our holes and we'll get this thing mounted. Now where it shows a little bit of white around the edge, I got a trick to show you for that. We'll just take a simple deburring tool. We'll come in here, knock all this fur off the inside edge. It's a pain in the butt to get to, but it will come off. Sometimes this Kevlar reinforced part here, you may have to get a razor blade and come back in here and do it, but it works both ways. Now here's Danny's Sharpie Tech tip of the week. Since this is a red car, I can get away with using a red Sharpie to go back over all these fibers where it's cut open. But here's my other tech tip. This works great for, I learned this back in the 90s working on aircraft in the military. So you have some red and blue AN fittings. They're looking a little rough for wear. Whenever we had stand checks and visits, or the FAA would come do inspections and stuff, we had some AN fittings that were unsightly but not unserviceable. You can take a blue marker, go over it, turn the whole thing back to blue. It looks shiny now, but when it actually dries and sets in, like that, at a distance and at a glance, you can't tell that there was anything wrong with it. This works well on red, blue, and even black AN fittings if you got them. But for today, we're going to use the red on the edges here so that this blends back in with our body. When we come back and put the green fuel filler in. This particular trick right here, I had never thought of doing this, and I didn't think it was very viable on these composite body cars. But of all people, my good friend, the late and great Danny Earnhardt, showed me this trick one day. And we'll get that bolted in, and you would probably think I knew what I was doing. Up next, I'm going to through drill these for a 1032, and then I'm going to install floating nut plates on my actual Schultz receiver for the fender, so I can unbolt it and bolt it and actually put a filler plate on here. I ordered filler plates for the left and right. These are fills, but the filler actually covers the hole in if you decide to put it back on the other side. So I'm going to do these three first. I'm going to get floating nut plates on it. I'm going to bolt it back in where it's secured in position. Then I'll pull the other clecos out and actually drill those. Up next, we're going to install some floating nut plates in our gas hole. So what we'll do is we'll stick a 1032 through the hole, line it up, get it in place, then we'll drill it with some 3/32, countersink them on the other side, and this will hold it in place. All I'm doing is using a countersink bit so that when I install my 3/32 rivet, it sits, well, that one fell out. So that when I install the 3/32 rivet, it sits flush like that and doesn't bind up against the quarter panel. Awesome. That's all 6 installed. We'll bolt this into the fender. I don't have a 4-inch hole saw right now, so I will pick one up tomorrow when I'm working in Denver. But for now, we're going to get this installed. I'm going to vacuum out the inside of the car, and then we'll get the fuel cell in. So it's been 2 days since we vacuumed out the trunk in the Supra. I was going to drill a hole in this, cut a hole in it for my fuel filler, my Schultz, and I realized I didn't have a 4-inch hole saw. I took this to the shop with me, cut it out, cleaned up my Schultz. We're going to install that today. I was going to put the fuel filler in the rack in the car, and then I realized I was out of material. I didn't have the aluminum honeycomb spacer blocks. Back in the day, these were made by Hutchison Pagan and a few other companies, and they take up the space in the fuel cell can for the actual fuel cell bladder. So these are ugly, but a friend of mine at a race team had these in the back room, stuff on the shelf, and gave them to me. It's hard to straighten them out. It's hard to make them pretty. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a box to put these in. They are lightweight, hollow, crushable. They are what NASCAR designed to go in the actual chassis can that holds the fuel cell. These will crunch under impact and smash. If you've ever seen the 13-gallon cell that NASCAR went to for a very short time, they had 2 cubes that they put in the corners of the fuel tank. I actually have one in the Denny Hamlin car. We'll take a look at that before I end this video. But I'm going to build a fuel cell block spacer with these and some material that I bent up at the shop. But first, let's bolt these together and get them in the fender of the car. So to bolt these 2 pieces together, I need to take this one apart. If you've never seen inside one of these, I'll disassemble it real quick and give you an overall rundown on what it looks like on the inside. It has an automatic relief valve built into it for a breather. And I'll show you the different segments of how it works. So we'll take this apart and I'll lay it out. So here's the actual receiver that bolts in the fender. Here's your vent portion of the valve. Here's your plunger. Here's your spring retainer and diverter, and here's the inner portion of it. So when this is inserted, it allows the vent air, because there's an O-ring sealing the actual liquid side, the vent air comes around the outside edge and vents on the outer ring right here. That's how this can vents back when they dump fuel into it. Now this is the retention spring and the plunger. These go together inside the Schultz valve. And when this is assembled, everything looks like that. Well, not exactly. Everything looks like that when it's assembled. Your vent air comes around the outside, around the edge of the ring. These nylon bushings keep it centered, and when you fill fuel, this is the only place the fuel goes in, when this is recessed. Also, when your fuel cell pulls a vacuum, because the fuel pump is drawing the fuel level down in the tank, you have to fill that void with something. What it's filled with is air. So you have air on the outside, and you also have that little flapper plunger right there that vents the negative pressure out of the fuel tank. As you can see, there's a small little spring right there, and that allows that to vent on its own and relieve the negative pressure. So now that I've got all this apart, let's go ahead and reassemble it in the way that I want it orientated and clocked. Is going to be just like that, so that the vent hose is facing the rear of the car. I'm using these AN style 1/4-inch washers, my 1/4-inch hardware to hold everything together. I'll show you what this all looks like once I get it all bolted together. Then we'll install it in the car. I'm just putting these 1 or 2 turns in until I get everything in there. As with anything automotive, never tighten everything up until you get every bolt started. So I've got them all in, and then I'll go around, tighten them up, pull everything together, and then we will mount this in the fender. That's everything nice and flush in the front with a washer. That's how it seats in the back, bolts holding the ring together. Now looking at this, you're probably saying, why do you have 8 1/4-inch bolts in here, and then you have 6 1032s holding the outside? There is a bracket that bolts on the bottom of here with longer hardware, comes through, holds a retaining nut on it. And there's a bracket that goes from here down to the chassis rail on the inside of the car. I've taken a pattern of this, and I have longer hardware. I'm going to make that bracket so that it clamps onto the inner chassis rail in the car. I'll show you that in a video down the road. For now, let's get this bolted on the car. Now we can bolt in our fuel filler, and then we can work on the fuel fill blocks. Now I'm using 6 1032 button head flanged screws to hold this in, or flange bolts, and I'll show you the difference here in a second. So This is a flanged Allen bolt. As you can see on the head, there's a flanged nut right there. The actual washer is built into the nut. Now the big difference is this has a lower profile, if you look at it. May not be in focus very well, compared to what people would use typically is a 1032 with a backup washer on it. So this is just an aluminum 3/16 rivet washer. This is commonly used in NASCAR. Back in the day, you would see these all the time holding the skirts and the valence on a race car. Teams have gone to this with the little nut head and the wide washer on it. You can see the difference in the two. That's what we're using to hold our fender fill in on the car. I'll also use these on the skirts to hold the skirts on this chassis. And that is our installed fender filler. Nice and flush mount all the way. Here's what it looks like on the inside. And like I said, there is a bar, there's a ring that mounts on the bottom here, and it has a bar similar to this that comes down and clamps to the chassis right here to help reinforce this. I'm going to build one of those, not on this video, obviously, but I am going to build one of these, and we'll mount it right there to reinforce that. And here's the void we need to fill. I've got the back plate in, and the back plate is in tight. That's not going anywhere. You can see it right there. There's an aluminum honeycomb piece on the very back already, and that's not going anywhere. It keeps the fuel cell from moving. I can't shake it. I can't move it or pull it. It doesn't go from side to side. So we need to build our filler box to go in here, just like I have on my Hamlin car. Back about 2002, 2003, NASCAR went to a little 13-gallon can, and that's what's in this car. This is a 13-gallon can they ran on 2-mile tracks, mostly California, Michigan, Pocono, Daytona, Talladega. And these boxes were sold by Motorsports Innovations Incorporated through BSR, Hutch, SRI, several other companies. They have the same aluminum honeycomb material inside these boxes. They're solid. So if this car ever gets into a crash, anything, those will crush before anything hits the fuel cell from the side. This car is pretty special to me, and maybe one day I'll do a video talking about it. But it has the correct vent fill, the correct Peterson fuel filter, fill hose, the correct Schultz valve in it, has the correct trunk tethers on it. Everything about this car is correct. Let's go build a fuel filler box. This is the same honeycomb material that you saw in the Denny Hamlin car. This is what's inside those aluminum boxes that's in the trunk. These I picked up this morning, actually at the last minute from a friend at a race team. I didn't have any of this material. Hey Rusty, he had a bunch of it sitting on the rack in the back of their Xfinity shop, told me I could take them. He gave me these. The only thing is they are ugly. These things are well race used and ugly. So I built a box, bent up some material, and we're going to fill this box with both of these. We're going to put aluminum sides on it, and it's going to be a very nice and aesthetically pleasing piece once it's all riveted together. So I'm going to work on that. And I was also able to go by 5-Star and Troutman and pick up my fill plate. This fill plate cover is going to go in that fender right there. Buddy, your hair is killing me, dude. So this fill plate's going to go in that fender right there. It's going to bolt on right there, but I still got to paint it. What is it, buddy? So these are the parts and pieces needed to assemble my fuel cell spacer block. I'm going to rivet all this together. It's probably going to take me about 20 minutes. I'm not going to film all this. I'm just going to get it done and bang it out and show you the finished product right about now. This is my finished fuel spacer block. We're going to install this in the car, riveted together. These sides and everything, they are 040 aluminum, and I use that honeycomb in the middle. Many teams built these. Like I said, they were sold by Motorsports Innovations Incorporated. I built this one because I didn't like I'll be honest with you, that aluminum honeycomb was fugly. So we're going to stick this in the car. We're going to bolt our fuel cell rack on. We're going to throw a vent and a fuel hose on that thing, and we're going to finish this video up. So let's get it installed. So this fits in here. And you want it to be snug. Up next, the fuel cell rack. This is the retaining top. Some call it a fuel cell cage, fuel cell rack. It's all the same. We're going to grab some grade 8 hardware and we're going to bolt this thing down. So that's all 8 bolted down. It's kind of hard to see the 2 bolted in from the side right there. Up next, we're going to secure our fuel filter. Then we're going to put our vent in our fill line, and we're going to be done with this. My buddy Rusty has reminded me that it's time to talk about fuel filters. There are 2 standard styles that are used in automotive racing in the Cup Series throughout the years. In the early day, it was the paper element Fram. There was also a Canton Mecca, a Wix, and an STP. These simply come apart. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this and seen this. Come on, bud, you kill me. It's just a standard paper cartridge with a stainless element around it to keep it from falling apart. Sits in a cup, has the top, collects debris in the bottom, a couple of O-rings hold everything together. This was used predominantly throughout the 80s, but like anything in automotive racing, there's a wide range of filters that were used by different teams, different sponsor alignments with filter brands and things of that nature. Not every car ran a Fram. So we're not going to use this. Reason being, the biggest it would be is a 3/8. Putting a number 10 on there would be really stupid because it's never going to flow more than that. This is a Peterson stainless steel element filter. This is a stainless cartridge. It's held in by a spring. These are rated in a multitude of microns, microns being the dirt particle size that can get through the actual filter element. This is machined and radiused on the inside. It flows really well. I've already cleaned this one. I'm going to put it back together and use it in my car. I am not going to use these mounts that are on it. They slide right off. Buddy, you are needy tonight. These are going to come off, and we are going to use a simple hose clamp style mount inside the car. I need to put some high pressure lube on that first. Peterson made these filters in a multitude of style, as well as K&N, Wix, Canton Mecca, System 1, and many, many others. I think I've got at least 30 filters. These are just some I'm going to show you. This smaller BSR filter, the primary use for this is between the fuel pump and your carburetor. I've never had one of these fill up. I've never had one of these clog. A lot of people like to use these between the pump and the carburetor in case the pump diaphragm comes apart and it pushes rubber particles up into the carburetor. The carburetors I have 2 small Peterson inlet filters on them going directly into the bowls, so I don't need that either. All of these are going to go back on the shelf, and we're going to use this. Once I clean it again, put some high pressure lube on the seal, we're going to hose clamp this in the car and put our fuel fill hoses on. Here's our Peterson filter. Shows the flow direction in it. The inside of this filter is radius to help flow. We're going to mount it right here. Simply hose clamp it to the fuel cell cage. I'm sure many of you have seen this 1,000 times before. We'll get it in line right there, that facing up, and we will clamp it right here. My fill hose to my supply line will come out of the top of my fill plate with a 90 radius, come back with another radius 90, and then we'll come out of the supply end of the filter and we'll go to our front feed line going to the fuel pump with a 45. Up next, we're going to put our vent on and our fill hose, and we are done. This is our 2.5-inch Dayco fill hose. Pull the tape off. We'll get this installed. Peel all that off, make sure nothing falls in there. And then we'll get this installed. Our fender portion, then we'll bend it. And bend it right around our fill portion. That's in line the way I like it. Now I can tighten down my radius ring. What are you doing? What are you doing in there? Trying to steal the show? What you're working on? On a safety side note, always double your hose clamps. Doesn't matter if it's on your coolant line, a fuel line. If you're building a race car of any type, things vibrate, things shake, things rattle, things roll. Always double your hose clamps and offset them as well. What I mean by offset is when you clamp them, offset where they sit. You'll have one screw on one side and one worm screw on the other, so that it exerts the same amount of clamping force all the way around your hose on both sides. we'll tighten those down by hand. This is my vent hose. These come in several different lengths and styles. Some people use the clear home improvement garden variety vinyl tube. I don't use that stuff. This is the stuff that comes from Brown & Miller. Race teams use it. It's good stuff. I need to clean this one, so I'm going to wipe it down, get some of this gook out of it, and we'll install it. So that's it for the fuel cell installation. I've got my filler in to cap off where the actual Schultz fender fill went in the car before. I've capped that off. I was going to put the tethers on, but I've got a few other things I want to do first. The fuel cell is installed. We built our spacer block. Fuel cell cage top is on. Waterman top in the fuel cell with fill plate, vent line, fill line, dry sump breather tank, Schultz head. We changed our fender fill. Put the Schultz head in the outside, bolted everything down. What are you doing, buddy? You coming to inspect the work again? I haven't run any of my fuel supply lines yet. Like I said, when the car is complete and I get everything mounted where I want it to go, I'm going to come back, take measurements, and I'm going to build all new lines, have them made, and run them throughout the car. The actual tethers need to go on next. They wrap around the lower trunk bar here. They come up and they bolt through right here with a washer. That nice size washer holds everything on. This actually bolts on, holds everything in. It would actually go this way. This bolt would be on the outside. It would go through. This washer would keep the tether from coming loose on the inside. I'll show you all that in another video. And I'm not sure if I'm going to paint or wrap this yet. I do know the whole car is going to get actually wrapped when I'm done with it. Where you going, buddy? And I got to clean up. A lot of this stuff needs to go into the other building, put away in storage, and I've got to sweep and mop the floor. Haven't done that in a while. This guy's holding things down. Hey, buddy. That's a wrap on this video. Fuel cell is in the Supra, so is the fender fill and the Schultz valve in the fender. I'm very happy with the way everything came out. All the information that you saw in this video is kind of just grazing through and giving you a heads up and an idea of what things are. They are not 100% verbatim, the actual technical spiel that goes along with everything. Every single one of those segments, from a fill plate, fuel cell bladder, fill top, filter, Schultz valve, there's a ton of information out there on the internet that you can find if you want to research those topics in depth. You just have to go on the internet and go down that rabbit hole and look for it. I greatly appreciate the response that I've received from so many of you since I posted that last video. It means a lot to me. I'd kind of given up on this channel. I wasn't enthused about it. I don't like the amount of time it takes to make a video and the amount of time it extends to finish a task. Quite literally, the fuel cell, filler, and everything, I would have that done in a day and a half. But filming it and looking for certain things has drawn it out to over a 5-day period. And then I've got to go back and edit all of this footage to make it make sense and kind of get it to flow. There's a lot of things that I want to say and do as I'm doing it, and I kind of get tongue-tied in some of these videos trying to convey in the best way and articulate the best information that I can to people. So if it seems clunky or if I get lost in what I'm saying sometimes, it's because I've got 400 things trying to come out of my mouth at once. It's just the way I am. And I'm holding back from cursing. 24 years in the service, people that know me, and as they say in all these research articles I've seen, that people that swear a lot are supposed to be intelligent and all this stuff. I don't know how well that works, but I do swear a lot, and it's hard to cut it out to keep these videos family friendly, especially if you have it playing in the background. Everybody seemed to like the Q&A at the end of the last video, so I'm going to try and do that every video, pick out 5, answer some questions. I've gone back through every video so far and dug out a few, and I printed them out, and we're going to run over those real quick. James Swanson 1139 asked, how did you get the great railing car hood from Hilton? After James died, I went over there. They had a sale on parts and pieces. Gentleman put an ad up on Facebook, Marketplace of all things. And I went over there, and the gentleman told me, if you can pick it up and you can carry it out, it's $5 a piece. And I don't know who these younger guys were or how they got the authorization to do it, but I went over there and I bought Holman Moody hubs, a banjo seat, that hood, rear gears, Dodge R5 parts, dyno cell parts. I literally filled up 3 pickup truckloads of stuff from James Hilton's place, and I still have a bunch of it. And all that stuff got cleaned out, and I think there's an auto repair shop in that building now. But all of the hoods that are hanging up in here, I have acquired them through either working with a team, work I've done for a team, car or truck that I bought, sold, scrapped, cut apart, just wild ways that you can pick them up. This is just a small example of what I have. I've got, I think I'm up to 120 different hoods. And I quite literally, my parts building, built 3 special pallets to stand them all up and a bungee cord to hold them up. And I just don't have enough room in this building or that building to ever hang them up. What will I do with them down the road? Who knows? Did you install inner axle seals in the tubes? This was asked by Wesley114. Yes, Seals It makes multiple sizes of these inner axle seals. Red, blue, purple, gold, green, and silver. They come in all different diameters and different seal types. This is a double seal. There's 2 seals in here. That's for your inner axle. The 3 O-rings seal it to the tube. There's a company now, I believe they're out of Illinois. They're actually making this inner seal like Seals It does. Instead of it being butyl rubber like this, it's actually made out of a red silicone, and they're pretty cool too. I also use drive plate flange seals. Say that 3 times fast. These come from Seals It also. Goes into the drive plate. Inner axle seals locks in there. Keeps all of the grease in the actual drive plate and doesn't let it spill out. Richard Gilliam 4334. Have you ever heard of swage lock fittings being used? Yes. The only place I use a swage lock fitting is on the expansion tank for the radiator. It actually holds a clear nylon tube that's pressure rated like 300 pounds. It's got a little pill in it, tells you what the actual tank level is in that. Where did you get the safety wire adapters for the bolts? So these are safety wire adapters. I'll do a close-up on these. So these are safety wire lock tabs. They go onto a bolt. They come in an infinite number of sizes, SAE and metric, from 1/4 inch, and I've seen them all the way up to 1 inch, even though I don't use them that large. Simply bolt slides to the bottom, just like that. Pretty simple. And then you can see on the top, you've got all your holes for the safety wire. The same goes for the larger ones. Quite literally drop it in, fold 2 of the tabs over to lock it to the bolt, tighten it down on whatever piece of hardware, bracket, mount that you need safety wire, and then you can use the opposing holes left to safety wire it to another bolt or a piece of hardware or a mount on your car. You can buy these in an infinite number of sizes in SAE or metric from McMaster Car. Believe it or not, a large majority of the race car parts and pieces as far as hardware, wiring, and multiple things like gasket sealer, seals, high pressure lube and stuff like that comes from McMaster Car. They are a great company, great people to deal with. I buy stuff from them all the time. Last but not least, Deckhand Gill 6114. Is Rusty up for adoption or sale? I think it's cruel, and I don't think it's correct to sell animals. I don't like puppy mills. I don't like kitten mills. I think all that stuff is bullshit, pardon my language. I don't think anybody should make money off the life of another animal or a person, but it's rampant. It's part of life. I can't change that. Is Rusty up for adoption? Yes, I would adopt him out to a good family, depending on who it was and where they were. I have seen, if you ever watched some of them hoarder shows where people got 46 cats, no, Rusty doesn't belong in a house with 46 cats. I have 2 cats in my house. We love the 2 cats that we have in our house. They're great animals. I've already rescued another one just like Rusty. My daughter has him. She's in the Air Force out in Utah. He made the travel trip in the car across country with her. He's a great animal too. Yes, I would be open to adopting him to a good family. Depends on who the person was and how far they had to go to take him. He is a good cat. Coming up next, not working on the Supra for a couple weeks. I got some very pressing things to do. On top of that, I got a track day to prep for and get the truck ready. Believe it or not, I think this is going to be the last hurrah for the KBM Tundra. I think I'm going to mothball it after that, jam out on the Supra, and get this thing finished and rip it. I'm also working on an RCR Harvick 105 Busch Series car. Had it up for sale. People thought it was a ripoff at $4,500, so I kind of got pissed off about it and fixed it. You may see that in an upcoming video too. I know people don't care for all the Toyota content, but they're a good company. They're great to me, and so are the Toyota race teams. Till next time, like, subscribe, comment below. I'll pick the best 5 out of the next video, and I may give something away to the best one. Thank you guys. I'll see you again soon.